also reminded me that I need to tell Sam to press record, which he's just done. Brilliant stuff. It's healthy to be part of a family of churches. It's healthy to get that teaching from outside, that insight from outside. Healthy to be reminded that there are churches around the world that experiences circumstances that we don't, difficulties that we don't. And also that God is on the move in remarkable ways. Reminds us that actually he's doing staggering things that maybe we might not have seen yet for a while. And obviously the global church is much, much bigger than Christ Central churches. Much, much bigger, and that's beautiful. But being part of that family, we get a snapshot of the world outside of our doorstep, and we get to partner with them. It's great to send money to them, great to pray for them, great to hear from friends in the Ukraine, Cambodia, other places, through the wonders of modern technology. During the weekend, Jeremy shared about this two-step priority for Christ Central churches in the coming years. Two priorities that would shape us as we go forward into the purposes of God. He described it as like a march. A 1, 2, 1, I'm not going to do the action. A 1, 2, mercy and mission. The mercy and mission should always be together because it's the heart of God. And he said, out of mercy, God so loved the world that he gave his son, sent him on mission. I must have listened to that promo video about 6 or 7 times in the lead up to Devoted or during Devoted. And it just occurs to me that I do not want us to lose that. I don't want us to think, well, that was Devoted and this is now. That was Christ Central churches, but this is Silk Life. Silk Life is part of that. And just as Christ Central churches are recognising the stirring of God to prioritise mercy and mission in the coming years, so God is stirring with the same heartbeat Silk Life because we're in the same family. Mercy and mission, the heartbeat of God. It's like the chambers in the heart, working synchronised, working, pumping, mercy and mission, the pumps that bring life to the body. Mercy and mission. So we're going to linger here for a while. I don't know how long yet, I haven't decided. God hasn't kind of let me in on the secret yet. In our prayer meetings, in our Sundays, meditating on the Word of God on these themes, engaging with His instructions, learning about the season ahead. It's like a season of training, preparation for action. This talk will feel more like a seminar than it does a sermon. This morning we're going to be looking at 1 Peter 3. From verse 8. 1 Peter is a short letter. If you've not read it before, you can probably read it in one sitting, not during the sermon. It's from Peter, hence the name, to early Christians who've been dispersed across the region by the Roman Empire. The letter includes some doctrine, but also it includes a whole load of stuff about the essence of Christian life. I can picture Peter writing it thinking, these guys are up against it. How can I help them? How can I keep them going? How can I build their faith in the midst of hardship and trauma? The readers, they were confused and discouraged in the face of persecution. And Peter encourages them to stand strong and points them to Jesus. It's a letter of separation, suffering, persecution, but also hope in pilgrimage and courage in the grace of God. So it runs like this. Finally, all of you, from verse 8, have unity in mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. And then he quotes from the Psalms. He said, whoever desires to love God and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. It's a great handbook. It's a great starting point. But it says, now, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good. But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honour Christ the Lord as holy. Always be prepared to make a defence to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile you, your good behaviour in Christ, may be put to shame. For it's better to suffer for doing good than it should be, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. So there's a handbook on Christian living. But resting in the middle of the passage is this crucial one-liner. Always be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you the reason for your hope. And this is about your Christian hope, not just I hope Mactown might get promoted, or I hope I might have a Lamborghini. Be ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you the reason for your hope. Truth is, being ready is a choice. It's a chosen willingness. A willingness to speak up. For Peter's readers, this was a choice that came with real consequences. They were living in a context where Christians were being mistreated for their faith. That violent hand that we mentioned 2 weeks ago. And they're urged not to be afraid. Peter instructs them to be ready. Don't hide away, don't cower away, but make a choice to be ready. In fact, always be ready is the phrase he uses. It's a sense of vigilance, even seeking, not accidental or blasé, but more of a combat stance. Tennis players have a stance before each shot. They're there, they're on their toes, 2 hands on the racket, feet apart. Small step. When the person plays the shot at the other end, they do their split step. As the ball moves over the net, they're anticipating the movement of the ball and they're positioning themselves for a forehand or a backhand. As the ball starts to come nearer to them, they're stepping forward or back, anticipating the bounce of the ball. Luke used to play in a squad, and I spent more hours than I care to imagine the coach drilling them. There they were, they didn't even have a racket in their hand or a ball in their hand. He was just telling them, split, turn, step. Split, turn, step. Split, turn, step. Split, turn, step. Just continuously drilling it into them. Split, turn, step. Repeatedly. Again and again. This is what readiness is. Because when you're playing a tennis match or when you're watching a tennis match, you don't even see it happening. But it happens every single shot they do. Split, turn, step. They read the situation, position their bodies, and then return the ball with poise and power. They are drilled. I wonder, are we drilled? Am I drilled? I wonder whether there's a sense in COVID land where the government instruction to stay in your house, stay in your family, don't speak to people, means that we've lost any sense of edge or expectation of being ready. It may even be we've decided actually speaking about Jesus is cringy. So decided not to do it, or just decided to maybe miss the moment. I don't know. He doesn't really allow us that option though, which is awkward. It says, in your heart, honour Christ the Lord as holy. In your heart, honour Christ the Lord as holy. And how do you honour Christ the Lord as holy? Well, it says, in your heart, honour Christ the Lord as holy. So, always be ready to give an answer. Gosh, that's challenging, right? Is that honouring Christ the Lord as holy is not just singing in church. It's not just our personal struggle with sin or temptation. Actually, in your heart on the cross, the Lord is holy and always be ready. What he's saying is that speaking about Jesus is an act of worship. Being ready to answer the question is an act of worship. Just imagine for a moment. Just imagine me and Carl were sat in a coffee shop. We're here in Macclesfield. And our old friend, maybe a school friend, the super cool kid from class at school, arrives in the same coffee shop. And he comes to me, he embraces me. He says, see if I knew the super cool kid at school. It's a breakdown of an analogy, but never mind. He embraces me anyway because he recognises me as the short blonde lad that his sixth formers used to pat his head and say is an EQ. And we reminisce over old times. And we arrange to meet up in a couple of days, which is lovely. But not once during this prolonged conversation do I ever acknowledge poor Carl. Oh, mean, man. And even at some point, cool friend from high school says, who's this? I go, oh, don't worry about him. Don't worry. Forget about him. Oh, because of me. Like me. He'd be well offended, right? What he wants is, Carl, this is my friend from school. You guys should have a chat. Sit down. You guys talk. I'm going to get coffee. That makes Carl feel special. I make a big deal of him. He feels snubbed if I just try and distance myself from him, right? Now, Carl isn't Jesus. True story. But as Christians, it's an act of worship when we identify ourselves with Jesus. What makes us distinct as a people group is that we follow Christ. And we speak his name with pride and joy. Anybody that knows me hears me talk about my kids. I just speak their name with pride and joy because they matter to me, because I love them, because my life is better with them than it would be without, even at 6 a.m. Now, some of you are shaking your head at that and quaking in your boots, maybe coming out in cold sweats, sweaty palms. That's okay, I feel that. There's some good news. There's 2 bits of good news. It's going to be really helpful for you, right? In this instruction, Peter says, be ready, what? Listen what he says to be ready for. Be ready to give an answer. To give an answer to anyone who asks. Peter fully expects that sooner or later people are going to ask you why you follow Jesus. They may not phrase it like that, but they're going to show an interest. The original readers, they were scattered, dispersed in new places. The culture there was different. The religion was different. The ethics were different. So they stood out. It runs, right? You have a different worldview because you have a different God, which means the ethics are different, which means the behaviour is different. So suddenly you put these 2 cultures together and they look different. The behaviour is different. And so you ask each other questions about why do you do that when I do this? Actually, you should stand out because the worldview and the culture around us is different to the worldview and culture in here. And because the worldview is different, the ethics are different. And so the behaviour is different. So don't conform to the ethics and the behaviour that you see around you. You do you. You hold on to your worldview, hold on to your God, let that shape your ethics, and let that shape your behaviour. And sooner or later, the questions will come. Peter is not saying that you need to be ready to go and beat people over the head. He isn't saying twist their arms behind their backs. He isn't saying wrestle them to the floor and make them listen. He's not saying any of that. He's not saying be ready to be violent. He's saying, no, you do you. You will look different. And the questions will come. And when they do, be ready to give an answer. At some point, people will ask you, why do you do what you do? How did you get through that tough season? How did you decide what to do with your money? How come your kids are like that? Why don't you swear? Why don't you get blooded at university and sleep around? There is a moment there to give an answer. You don't need to be obnoxious or unpleasant. In fact, Peter's instructions in verse 3 is to act with, got this, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. That doesn't sound like obnoxious and unpleasant, does it? If someone asks you a question about your faith, answer it with sympathy, love, tenderness, and humility. Not obnoxious unpleasantness. It's a relief for you, eh? So how do you do that? Well, here's a top tip. You can write this one down. You may not remember it. Smile. Rule number 1, always smile. Don't panic. It's just a question. You get asked a million questions every day. This is no biggie. Don't overyoke the moment. Just answer the question. Make sure you answer the question they actually asked you, not the question you wanted them to ask. Do it gently, with kindness, and smile. You don't have to deliver a systematic theology. You don't need to cover the whole package in one conversation. Just answer the question they asked. And if they want to know more, do you know what they'll do? They'll ask another question. And then you get the next bit. Simples, right? Do you know, if you're at school this week, there's probably going to come a point where they say to you, and we have this conversation, do you really go to church? You'll probably find the question comes with a level of surprise, maybe even disrespect, that doesn't happen for other faiths. It's like a disbelief that anyone would even choose to be a Christian anymore, particularly young people. Do you really go to church? It's kind of because we live in a bit of a post-Christian culture now, where no one does it anymore. Well, that's the belief, or the common assumption. In those moments, do you know what? Go for the simplest answer you can. But if you're feeling bold, go for this. Yeah, I go to church, I love it. Do you know what? Just smile. End of. You just shook their worldview in one sentence. Their whole worldview. What? There's a young person that actually seems quite nice, quite sensible, with their feet on the floor, that just said they love going to church. Say, what? And then they'll probably come back and say, do you believe in God? And then you can just say, yeah, I'd be lost without him. And then smile. And they'll say, oh. And there'll be two responses at that point. It really sorts the wheat from the chaff, okay? Because they'll either be rude to you, which is fine. It probably just means they have no idea how to handle the moment, so the only reaction they've got is to swear at you or say something stupid. And that's fine, yeah? They might decide that's enough information for today, my worldview has been rocked. Somebody I know goes to church, they actually quite like it, and they believe in God. Gosh. They'll probably go home and talk to their parents about it. Or they'll want to know more. It happens. You just answer the question they asked, and they've got a choice. They can ask another question, and they can say, that's enough for me today, thanks very much. Simple, right? So it's important, a couple of words of advice, important to listen to the question they ask. Don't assume you know what they're asking. Questions are like a window into somebody's soul. The question they're asking actually tells you something. And you never really know where somebody's coming from. So, top tip, give a short answer. We can often think, this is my moment, I've got to get it all in. We give a really short answer and then say, is that helpful? Is that what you meant? Great principle in conversation generally. Give a short answer and ask a question. It's not a monologue. They're not asking you for a sermon. That's reserved for the guy standing here. The more you listen, the more you learn about the person, the better equipped you are to answer the question. The more you blather on, the more likely they are to lose interest. The more likely you are to wander away from the actual question they asked. So keep checking. Is this helpful? Does this scratch where you're itching? Is it answering your question? And if you don't know the answer, that's fine. Just say, I don't know. Sometimes, someone asks me a question that I never even thought about. Not necessarily a bad question, just I haven't thought about it. Pretending to be an expert on something you know nothing about is a bad idea. You'll get found out. They'll think you're silly. Don't do that. Just say, I don't know. But I'll find out. I'll come back to you. Is that right? Actually, sometimes it is a bad question, because the question fundamentally shows a misunderstanding about what Christianity is. And I encounter those misunderstandings all the time. But what a great opportunity that is to be really helpful for somebody if their question, basically underpinning it, is an assumption about Christianity that completely isn't right. I think the greatest challenge for the UK church in reaching people that are in church is the unravelling of myths and truth, separating human tradition or expectation from the reality of who God is. So these moments are gold. If somebody asks you a question and you can recognise in that actually is a fundamental misunderstanding about what it means for you to follow Jesus, well, embrace that. I am so glad you asked me that question. Do you know, I'm thinking about this and there's all sorts of ideas pinging off in my mind. Can we talk about this? It's great. Do you know, it's true that maybe the question is intended to trip you up or attack God by attacking you. That's fine. Do you know what? A kind, gentle response will never do any harm. You're not trying to win an argument. They might be, but you're not. You're just trying to answer a question. You can lose a debate and still win a heart by being loving, approachable and kind. It doesn't matter how many times you lose, in inverted commas, the debate. Just answer the question with kindness and tenderness and brotherly love, just like Peter tells us to do. And you can go home with a big smile on your face. Which brings me to my second encouragement. As Peter says, always be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks you, getting this, the reason for your hope. The reason for your hope. Not my hope, or Nick's hope, or Dan's hope, or Joe's hope, or whoever else. Your hope. Why are you happy in Jesus? They may not phrase it like that. They may not phrase it like Peter. But bottom line is, people want to know why you bother following Jesus at all, when the culture current around you is pulling in the opposite direction. Why are you choosing to swim against the tide? Why are you bothering? Or how are you managing to walk through the circumstances of life without falling apart? And that's a very personal answer. It's about your experience of God, your understanding as a Christian. You're not trying to give the sermon answer, you're giving your answer. Why do you love Jesus? Believe it or not, some people really want to know. Be it because of curiosity, or confusion, or heartache. Loads of people really want to know, why do you love Jesus? And does it work? Does it help? How do you do it? We looked at Acts 1 at the prayer meeting on Thursday. Acts 1 is the scene where Jesus is reconnecting with his disciples after his death and resurrection. They watched him die and now he's miraculously alive. And so he starts to give them the instructions of what they're to do next. And they're hanging on his every word, because this is a big deal, right? Jesus resurrected back from the dead. We've only got him for a short time. He's going to tell us how to do church. He's going to tell us how to do Christian life. And so these are the instructions that Jesus gives them. Ready? You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come on you. You will experience the Holy Spirit. That's the reason for your hope right there, right? I've experienced the Holy Spirit. I've encountered the resurrected Jesus. And then you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the end of the earth. Witnesses. What do witnesses do? We asked this question on Thursday night. Cliff gave a brilliant answer. He said they stand up in court and they answer questions from a lawyer. The lawyer will ask the questions and the witness will tell people what they saw and heard. So, Christian, what have you seen and heard? What's been your experience of God in the years you've walked with him? What have been the truths that have guarded your heart and mind in tough times and helped you with crucial decisions? What have you seen and heard? Be ready to give an answer. Have it in your mind. See, I know that Jesus has shaped my character. I can point to the places where he's done it. I know that he's looked after me and kept me safe through difficulties. I know there are times when he's guided my decisions. And that is my story. That's what I've seen and heard. More recently, I know that he guarded the hearts of our family as we followed him from Salford to Macclesfield. And I definitely know that he sustained us as we did homeschooling for a year while Joe was working and I ran a charity in Salford and a church in Macclesfield. There was pressure, but his grace was enough and he kept us going. And he held us together, and he helped us grow, and we made it through it. And in him we were fruitful as a family, despite the difficulties, and his peace was our medicine in uncertain or anxious times. And that's my story. That's what I've got to share. It's the reason for my hope. It's not all that complicated, is it? But it's true. And I now know that next time the rubber hits the road, I know that his track record is good, and I can trust him for the future because I have experienced his faithfulness. I felt his love, and I felt his kindness. Now remember, Peter tells us to act with sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. And that's what this is all about. See, telling people about Jesus has two sides. On one side, it's out of a desire to honour Christ as Lord and Holy, to worship him. On the other side, we tell people about Jesus out of love for them. Because it is the most tender and humble response. Because often we're tempted to give people advice in their difficulties, but actually that's arrogance. The humble thing in those moments is to point them to Jesus, the one that's actually got power and influence and wisdom to be able to help them. That's humility. Because the reality is I can't fix all your problems, I can't solve them all. But I love you enough to point to Jesus. Because I feel your pain and your sorrow, and I know that it's real, and I know when I've been in pain, he cared for me. Because you might have made a mess of your life, or a particular situation, and I know when I've made a mess of things, he's been gracious and kind and restored me. Because you're nagged with anxiety, I know when I've been awake at night, riddled with anxiety, or I've been fighting back panic at work, or I've been unable to eat or worry, he's been there and he's carried me through. In fact, in your hardship, the most sympathetic, loving, tender or humble thing I can do is point to my journey with Jesus. Because he is the most precious thing that I have, because in him is nourishment for life. Do you know, it's not Bible bashing to point people to Jesus. It is Bible bashing, it isn't Bible bashing to answer questions with honesty and integrity. But it is Bible bashing to rant at people that don't want to know. It is Bible bashing to try and win arguments to show off. And it is Bible bashing to manipulate, exploit or bully. But that isn't what the Bible tells you to do. Some people are completely longing and searching for hope, purpose, meaning, belonging and forgiveness. They are craving it. So let's give people the answers they're asking for instead of doing what we often do, which is pretend we don't have them. We do have the answers because it's him. It's Jesus. The reason for my hope is because I've experienced Jesus and found him to be good. If you're listening and you wouldn't call yourself a Christian, you're really welcome. Let me tell you, the reason for my hope It's because I've experienced Jesus and found him to be good. I've found him to be enough in every situation, even the moments when it hurts. He's enough and he's good. If you're listening maybe on YouTube or Facebook at a later date, actually you can experience him too. He's not distant, he's not far off. You can grow to know him over time. I look back and I see the way that he's shaped me now over like 20 years. Fixed things in me, fixed things that are broken and people that I broke. Restored what was broken and led me to more beautiful experiences, and that can be true for you as well. I'd love you to experience that. Maybe some of you are even ready. Maybe you've been scanning around listening for Christian material online for a long, long time, and this might just be the moment. So I'm just going to lead us, people in the room, you'll cope with this. I'm just going to lead us in a prayer for the benefit of those that might be plugging in at a later date. So it runs like this. Dear Jesus, I want to experience a deep, meaningful, rich relationship with you. I want to experience your faithful love, your grace and your mercy, your forgiveness. I want to journey through life with you as my guide, my closest friend and my God. Jesus, restore me in all the broken places. Forgive me where I've made a mess of things, hurt people or dishonoured you. Some of it feels out of my control and like it's unravelling fast, and I know that I need you. I know that I need a rescue. Equip me for life ahead. I feel like whatever's coming around the corner, I'm going to be better off doing it with you. So guide me. Guide my thoughts, my feelings, my actions, so I can honour you and be a source of blessing for others. Jesus, teach me to love you and to follow you. Amen. Now, it might be you prayed that prayer. My suggestion for you would be to go to a Bible in a modern translation, flick over to one of the Gospels. I always go for Mark's, it's nice and short. Just sit and read and get to know Jesus. And at the start, before you start, just say, God, show me. Show me. Show me yourself. Show me about myself. Show me what I need to do in response to this passage. And if you're living in a place where you haven't got access to the Bible, you could just go somewhere like Bible Gateway and just online and just type in Mark's Gospel. And there'll be loads of places where you can find it. Feel free to get in touch if that's helpful for you. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll speak to you soon. See you then.